When we are talking about an 18th century salon, we're talking about primarily aristocratic kind of practice. These would be large homes of nobles and other people of such rank where they would have very lavish, very large and opulent affairs where people come and enjoy musical entertainment. When I say large, we're talking 300–400 people. Aristocratic class starts to lose their sort of political and cultural power because they are running out of money. We have simultaneously the rise of the middle class. And what happens is that they start to take up the social and cultural role that the aristocratic class had maintained previously. So the salon in the 19th century, when we think of that, we're thinking primarily of middle class people running these salons. When we talk about the middle class, we're talking about two streams. One is sort of the bureaucratic middle class, educated middle class, and the other would be entrepreneurial. And salon affairs were primarily for entertainment, social gathering, networking, courtship, and those sorts of activities, card playing, music, poetry. Sorts of things. It would be much smaller than the aristocratic affairs, so maybe 30 or 50. Some of them would have been larger as well. But it's important that we don't think of this as sort of the intimate domestic space where a family gathers around the piano. We can think of this more, I think, as public concerts in a private home would be probably a better way to think about it. It plays a really important role because this is where musicians and writers and philosophers go to mingle, to have their works known and to find patrons as well. So it's an important meeting place for them to gain support, economic support, I guess you could say. I think that in the 19th century, there's documents that sort of suggest you don't find a single home, middle-class home, without a piano. And that sort of speaks to the economic impact that it would have had. So people are buying pianos, they're buying music, they are offering patronage of musicians and composers, and so it has probably a fairly significant impact, at least in the music industry. So the middle class, it was really important for them to somehow sort of distinguish themselves from the aristocratic class. They didn't want to sort of be lumped in with them, and one of the ways that they did that was through the pursuit of education. And a huge part of the pursuit of education was the pursuit of music. And so this becomes a huge sort of cultural commodity, so to speak, for people to use in climbing social networks and making contacts and showing the rest of the world that we were educated and privileged financially so that they could actually, pursue these things. You get a mix of people. You get both amateur and professional musicians playing side by side, which is something that we're not necessarily familiar with anymore. Virtuoso musicians traveling through places are also coming in and playing. Well, I suppose it's a place where people play out their music education, especially for women, because music was a huge part of the distinctly female education. And this is where they sort of got to strut their stuff, so to speak, and to put that education on display. It's not. We have both men and women attending these salons. However, I think it would be fair to say that women tended to sort of dominate them, at least from an organizational perspective. So we often have the women organizing them and frequently being the performers at them. And there's reasons for that, social and cultural reasons for that. Yeah, I mean, if we're going to sort of try to recreate a 19th century salon in the contemporary context, we would have professional musicians and amateur musicians gathering together. We would have polite conversation. We might talk about politics. We might be trying to make professional connections with people. And then we would be also, of course, partaking in musical activities and these sorts of things. They would, actually there are people who are carrying out this practice even here in Edmonton. They clear out their living room, they put in seating, and they create sort of a stage for the performers to perform.